Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be heading back to Warlords of Draenor to solo some of the raid content, because clearly everyone just misses Warlords so much and wants to relive the glory days. But, you know, sarcasm aside, the raids of Warlords, they were actually pretty great, and now that we've got a decent item level in Legion, it's actually possible to solo some of the content. Why would you want to solo some of it? Well, mainly just for fun, also for some Transmog gear. Now, this video was done in normal mode. Heroic is perhaps a little bit much for now, at least for most classes and specs, but like with normal, it will be very easy with enough gear, and that's definitely a gear level that you will hit within this very first raid tier of Legion. For the most part, the only difference is the color of the gear that you get at the end, so that's really more of a Transmog decision. Now, I tried doing this stuff back on the beta at item level 810 and it was not feasible. Now I'm item level 847, but it's pretty well itemized gear, and I've also got the Order Hull 6-piece set. So overall, I think this stuff is quite easy for some classes, and you really do need to hit a kind of DPS breakpoint before the stuff is easy, unless your tanking can just survive through stuff. Now, I did this content as a hunter, brilliant in some circumstances, less so in others. Keeping boss aggro on our pet is a pain since Glyph of Misdirection has been removed, and then our self-healing is either really strong or really weak depending on the situation. It's got a 2-minute cooldown for 30% of our health, but the cooldown duration is reduced if we kill a mob, so trash fights give us brilliant sustain, but single targets can see your character's health just worn down pretty significantly. Perhaps BM with a Spirit Beast is a bit better, but my BM weapon's pretty terrible, and I don't really enjoy the spec that much. So with all that background covered, let's start off with Highmaul. KARGATH was simple enough, not much health in the guy, and really it's just like doing the regular fight. All you have to do is kite him into the fire any time he does the frenzied rush. Sometimes you'll be impaled, but it's really no big deal if your damage is good enough. I DPS'd him fast enough to miss out on the chain throw phase. I would worry that that phase would lead to the boss despawning, so you probably just need to do enough damage to get through him. Overall though, it is pretty easy with what I'd say is kind of like raid ready damage. I tried Butcher next, and I was not able to kill him. Basically, whenever you get 6 stacks of his cleave, you will die instantly. Now, stuff like Aspect of the Turtle doesn't prevent a stack from being applied to your character. Now, I might have been able to kill him if I had Drums of War, or if I was BM using Ancient Hysteria. Now, I did try, using Ancient Hysteria and then swapping back to MM, but whenever you do that, the buff is removed. So perhaps using a pot would have done the trick for me. Suffice to say, Butcher will be super easy if you have the DPS to clear him before you're instantly killed by the stacks of cleave. It's kind of like a slightly more punishing version of Garjal. It's just the damage race. Something that will be, I think, quite easy once you've got the gear. Next, Brakenspore was really pretty easy overall. Now, I did have some threat issues which were a little bit annoying, but what was quite nice is that his adds would refresh the cooldown of Exhilaration, so with a little bit of sustain, he's easy to kill, and I'm sure that if you do have any gaps with damage output, you can just use the Flamethrower and the buff, the damage buff from it to, buff up your DPS. Now, that said, the only other thing I would say is just, don't stand in the bad mushrooms, and ensure that you kill the pea shooter things, because they will put a debuff on you, which isn't particularly nice. So next we move on to TECTUS. He was super easy, it's just a case of AoE and, nuking him down. If you are playing a spec that's not very good at AoE damage, he might be a little bit of an issue. I found that threat got a bit out of control when there were loads of shards of TECTUS and Misdirection was on cooldown, but overall it was not much of an issue. He doesn't have any terribly scary mechanics. I found that his like channeled rumble thing, which, was the big scary bit of the actual fight, that doesn't really scare you that much when you've got a Legion health pool of north of 1.5 million. Next, Twin OGRON, they were really easy. MM does super high damage to this because of the cleave, so that was really quite lovely. And their mechanics, they're just not that scary, just move out of the stuff as you would if you were doing the fight properly. Have the two bosses, stacked up, which I guess is unavoidable if you're going to be soloing, so you can get some cleave damage on them. Overall, though, they're pretty good. Next, Korra was really easy. This bit surprised me. None of his mechanics posed much of a threat, even those bouncing ball things, whenever they hit the ground, it didn't do much damage to you. Overall, I was a bit surprised, but it was just a case of nuking through him, really. Was not that tricky. And then finally, Margok was also a bit of a cakewalk. His damage wasn't that scary at all, his adds would refresh the cooldown of Exhilaration. Overall, it's a very non-linear raid, so, even if you can't kill Butcher, which was the case for me, you don't need to do that to unlock the final boss. Really, the usual stuff just applies to Margok. Don't stand in the ruins, I suppose, but overall, there's nothing that really stands out in my mind as being a massive problem to deal with. So next I went into Blackrock Foundry, not as successful, but we still did get some stuff killed. So GRUUL required a little bit of careful management when it came to threat. GRUUL wasn't that scary once I got used to him, you just need to avoid the avoidable stuff and beware of Inferno Strike. It's his tank mechanic, it's a big frontal cone cleave thingy, never stand in it if you're a pet class. Now if you're not a pet class, I could see you maybe struggling with the damage, perhaps the tanks will be fine, not really sure about the others though. Overall, I find that if you can last long enough to get to his rampage phase where he just does those, like, you know, big attacks on the floor, he just does a whole bunch of them in a row. If you can survive for long enough to get to that, you can just stand out of the thing, heal yourself up a bit in the interim, and that should give you the sustain that you need to then finish off the fight. Now, OREGORGER, well, what a bastard. I hated him at the time, still don't like him. He was oddly hard because of how much damage his tank mechanic deals. Basically, Turtle doesn't save me from it, and one exhilaration just wasn't enough to allow me to survive. I would imagine that OREGORGER would be pretty doable for most people if you can either get the DPS to kill him before his, tank acid blobs kill you, or, if you can just somehow survive through them with your class mechanics. But yeah, he just, wasn't really the best friend for a hunter. Not that much fun. But a fight that's really good for hunters is Beastmaster DARMAC. So, first of all, never stand in his spears. If you do that, you will wipe. The rest of the mechanics though, well, they're really pretty okay. They do a bit of damage, but not really a major concern overall. As a hunter, I was able to refresh my exhilaration from the beasts that he summons, which is quite nice. And there's a whole bunch of times where I mention this exhilaration thing. If you are a DK, this will also proc like your, is it Dark Sucker, whatever? But any of those like self-healing mechanics, they'll be, procced from the trash here because it's still a close enough level to your own. I think it's level 101, 102, something like that. So yeah, Beastmaster DARMAC was really okay, just try not to stand in the crap. That said, I found that it wasn't really that much of a problem. But yeah, big rule, just don't get killed by the spears because they will leave you unable to control your character, meaning you can't do anything and he will rip you to pieces. Next, we've got Operator THOGAR. He was really easy. Now, he did dish out pretty heavy damage on me whenever he was just, attacking my character, but most of the time I could just keep that aggro on my pet, so it was okay. Overall though, the fight was just a matter of killing the ads when they spawn. You don't want to be swamped by all of that extra damage. Then you just need to avoid the trains. I didn't do the best job of that, which is kind of funny. Even when I did get hit by the trains though, wasn't much of an issue to be honest. But yeah, avoid the trains, kill the ads. There's a lightning thing he'll put in the ground. It does a small bit of damage, so you probably don't want to stand in that. But overall, I definitely see THOGAR as being one of the more killable bosses. So you can't get Iron Maidens, you can't fight them until you've cleared everything else in the instance, bar Blackhand of course. So I tried Hans and Franz, but I found that they would just pick me up and then never put me down, which made the fight basically unkillable. I don't know if that's a bug or just, it's how the intended mechanic works if you're going in there as a single character, but unfortunately that issue with Hans and Franz meant that I couldn't try the other fights. I imagine that Flamebender KARGATH would have been pretty doable, same goes for Kromog, but no idea because I couldn't get past Hans and Franz, and then with Blast Furnace, well, that would be scary, but I couldn't get past OREGORGER, so I couldn't get to Blast Furnace, which is a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, that's pretty much the overall look of the early soloing. I'll probably do Hellfire Citadel a little bit later on once I get more gear, especially once I start getting the trinkets from Emerald Nightmare and probably Trial of Valor. That will make a lot of this stuff a lot more doable. Overall, a lot of this content is very soloable depending on your class and gear level. Now, I'm sure that Blood DKs can, solo all of this stuff pretty easily. That's often the case with how Blood's mechanics work. But for the purpose of this video, I didn't want to go super tryhard on the whole thing because this is about testing kind of like what most people have a pretty good shot at doing based on their class and spec, assuming that they've got the gear. So why would you do this overall? Well, as I said, pretty much just for the Transmog gear, maybe for the odd achievement. Warlords does have some really cool weapon models, so I can see this being content that quite a few people will want to run. Money making isn't really possible from this stuff because of the new raid system. It's also scaled to a minimum of 10 players, so if you solo it will mean hardly any gold from the boss. And make sure you turn on Master Looter instead of Personal Loot, because yeah, you want that to be on Master Looter. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. Quick little look at the situation of soloing that content. Hopefully that'll give you some pointers if that's something that you're interested in doing in game. But that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.